Welcome to the As Yet Unknown podcast. My name's Alex Snyder, your back pocket coach consultant and connection catalyst. Entrepreneurship is a bit like bungee jumping, a big leap into the unknown, and it can be a lonely, bumpy ride. It's also one of the most empowering and liberating things you can do. Each episode is a dose of fresh perspectives designed to leave you feeling connected to innovative ideas and inspired about growing your business your way. Thanks for tuning in. Now let's have an adventure. Welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today and welcome Beckie. Thank you so much for being here. You and I have the most history of anyone who has been on here so far. We go, I'm going to say way back to our consulting days, over 10 years ago. Not that long, but a lot of life has happened.
Yes.
And we worked on a doozy of a project together when you were based out of Vancouver. I was commuting weekly from Montreal to Vancouver. And what I will say is that you are one of the sharpest, kindest, and most genuine humans I've had the pleasure of working with. Popping in and out, seeing your journey post KPMG, both of us being in startup space, now both of us in the more solopreneur roles. It felt really serendipitous as this series evolved, that we were coming back together to collaborate again. And it just really made sense to tackle career evolution for those who might be feeling the urge to make a change, but possibly scared that it's not the right time or really uncertain about where they want to head. And I think telling it both through our own stories as well as through the lens of our current roles in coaching and advisory and the tools that we use there is going to be really powerful. So I'm so excited for this. I'd love for you to add on to that intro and tell people just a little bit about yourself.
Oh, well, first of all, Alex, I am so excited to be having this conversation with you. And thank you so much for that kind introduction. When I think back about my career in consulting, there's a couple of people who stand out, and you are like the top person. I loved doing that project with you. And we had a bit of a crazy time, and I think it was something that cemented our friendship for a really long time. So really, really thrilled to be here. So excited to connect and to share a little bit of our journey, and also, some ways and of different approaches in terms of how you can look at your career. But just to give you a quick background about me, so I started my career in management consulting, really enjoyed it, but then thought, okay, what else could I do? And so I went back to school and I got my second business degree. Decided, okay, maybe I want to go back into consulting, but realized that very quickly that was not the right direction for me. And so I joined a startup as a co-founder. The startup was called Prosper, and it was the first mobile coaching platform that was launched. And so we had a B2C platform, we had a B2B platform as well. It was just a wild ride of building this brand new business, starting to educate a market around what coaching was. Exited the business in 2020, just before the pandemic started. And for me, there was a bunch of life moments that happened all at once. So exited the business, had my first baby 12 hours after I signed those papers. So that was a whole nother journey in and of itself. And then went on my own career discovery journey of what do I do next? I was the first time without a job and no longer had this company. I was a brand new mom. And so I felt like my identity was really getting shifted in terms of who was I and where was I going. So really grateful for coaching along the way. But after my mat leave, ended up founding my own consulting company where I worked with scale-ups and Fortune 500 companies, working a lot in the organizational development space. And then from there, ended up getting connected to the buyers of Prosper, and later on joined as their managing director. And they had acquired all the assets to build a business called Blue Spark, which if you're interested in leadership development for your team, highly recommend checking them out. The founders are fantastic and they do really great work. But we built that business while I was there from pretty much 0 to 2 million, and set up their team to make sure that they were really poised for success. So highly recommend checking them out. Then I went on another mat leave and again thought, okay, my business, if you're not working on it as a solopreneur and as a consultant at that time, there wasn't much left to come back to. There was a lot of work that I was going to need to do to really rebuild that business. And so I went back to the drawing board again and thought, okay, where do I want to take my career? One of the themes for me has been career development, both for me personally, but also for hundreds of other people. I've taught courses at universities. I've led recruitment functions for Fortune 500 companies. I've hired my own teams globally as well as remote and in person. So I love the space, and was always doing coaching on the side, but felt like this was the season to really dive in and support more people through this process. So my coaching company is Thain-Blonk and Associates. It's super original, and really, really love supporting people.
You stretch that creative naming.
I know, right? I think I was creatively blocked at that point, but anyway, it's registered, and so we're going with it. But really appreciate working with people who are all the way from early career all the way up to 25 years in their career, who are looking to discover what's next, and not just getting tactical about how do you update your resume and do your networking. We do all of that, but I really love to dig deep on why do you want to move on from where you're going, and what is your big vision for what your career could look like? Because I think so often we just quickly transition from one thing to the next without actually stopping to think about what impact do we want to have, who do we want to serve, and how do we want to create a life that we really love waking up to on Monday mornings. So that's a little bit about me.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. For those of you listening, if you can't already tell just from listening to Beckie's voice, she is such a natural mentor. And when I heard she was doing this, my excitement was not containable. I don't know how many people I've sent your way, but I know a few of them have landed like their dream role after, working with you. I think one of them after just a couple conversations. So
yeah, that one was fun.
I love that. I'm actually going to jump in, and I normally try to highlight my guests as much as possible, but just given what we're going to talk about, I'm going to give you guys a quick view of my career progression so that there's some context for both of us. You might have heard this story if you've heard me on other people's podcasts, but what I love to do is strategy and leadership, and it feels like the most sort of seemly journey. But when I look back, hindsight is always 20/20, and I realized that I actually grew up as an athlete, and strategic thinking and rapid scenario analysis was absolutely ingrained in me, like almost as a child and definitely as a teen. And that's sort of how my brain developed, for better or for worse, that it's always looking at what's in front of you, what are the strategic options, and then the ability to kind of pivot based on what actually happens and in the moment. So in my career, I had experience across tons of industries. I did everything from hospitality to construction to accounting to architecture, lots of different things. And I eventually landed in a director of marketing and professional relations role for a surgical team for the few years before my MBA. I went and did an MBA. I never thought I would go back to school. I didn't fit well into school. So to be super clear, my undergrad was 4-year degree in 3 years while working just to get the hell out. It was not a fun time. And so after my MBA, I went into strategy consulting, did about a decade, which included a lot of operational improvement work and also being seconded into the mergers and acquisitions team. So that was literally across the globe, 3 or 4 continents. Just so much experience, so much exposure to leaders and industries and corporations. But I took a really hard exit because I was kind of being pushed towards more and more leadership and partner track. And I knew that was going to be golden handcuffs. And I just had this feeling that I wanted to do some other things. I really wanted to find different ways to make impact. So I left without a plan and without a job. And we'll talk a little bit about that, I think, later, probably, because we're going to talk about coaching and your why and kind of how to figure things out. But where I landed after selling everything and becoming nomadic was in startup world, where I partnered into one business that I had sat on the board and done some consulting work for, and actually co-founded a second business with the founder of that one. So I just jumped right in and was like, let's do 2 startups at once. And Yeah, so I'm going to focus on the way we partnered into, because really my role there was to help grow and increase the kind of operational maturity and stability and sustainability, profitability of that company. And through doing the strategic planning, after about a year and a half of successfully growing and stabilizing, we decided with my co-founder that becoming part of a bigger ecosystem would be the right opportunity. We knew where we would need to focus to do the next round of growth, and it was an area that was going to be really difficult to do bootstrapped. So we started to look for potential partners or acquirers, and actually had a deal pretty much lined up. And I actually flew back from Indonesia in March of 2020 to run this transaction. Landed, the borders closed the next day, and the deal fell apart 2 to 3 weeks later. The buyer had
Oh
to
my
lay off half their
goodness.
employees. And it killed our deal, but I'll be honest, COVID nearly killed our business. There's about 2 months where we weren't quite sure we were going to make it due to the impact to our clients.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we did manage to not lay anyone off. We really put all the energy into pivoting and 3x'd our business in the next 10 months and exited in April of 2021.
Wow.
And what I learned through all of that journey was that I really, really loved supporting founders and entrepreneurs and leaders
Mm-hmm.
to build their business acumen, build their teams, refine their strategy, build out their own role so that they could best lead their company and achieve their goals. And so while I was VP for the buyer, which was part of the deal, going across to help run the new division and do post-merger integration, I built out my advisory coach consulting business, and really also figured out kind of what values were most important to me and how I wanted to shape that. So what I do
Mm-hmm.
now, and most of you probably know, is working with founders, leaders, entrepreneurs to help them map out their strategic roadmaps, help them work through the priorities that will get them there, and make sure that alongside of that, their own leadership is growing beside their business so that their business doesn't outpace them.
Mm-hmm.
And I am able to do that in a way that really aligns with a lot of my values around impact, location independence, ownership of my schedule, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it has been like Beckie's story, like quite a journey, and so fulfilled and fortunate of where I've landed. And so that is why we wanted to bring this to you, because I think we all are a little bit more aware of the shoulds and the societal norms and the
Mm-hmm.
pressure that many people have to succeed in ways that other people really can identify with or value.
Yeah.
But both of us left successful corporate careers that we could have easily stayed in for the rest of our lives, that would have
Mm-hmm.
left us in very, very comfortable financial situations, and that in many ways we enjoyed, to pursue other things and to experiment, I think is going to
Mm-hmm.
be a really strong word for um, today's conversation. So that is really the foundation of how we came up with what we wanted to talk about. Was, hey, just because you've built a successful corporate career, if you aren't feeling like fuck yes in it, if you are feeling like something is pushing you to make a change, it's absolutely an option, but also to recognize that it can be really hard. And
Mm-hmm.
Becky, you said something when you were talking about your why. So when you know
Mm-hmm.
in your gut that it's time for a real
Yeah.
change, but maybe it scares you, maybe you don't really know what to do next.
Yeah.
Why do you start with your why? And I want to know, because I actually start with the why for a lot of my clients' businesses as well.
Yeah. Well, and it's such an important topic to dive into, and it's really hard. It's because it takes a lot of self-reflection, and there's a lot of work to do to actually really craft it properly. But one of the things, before I dive into that, Alex, I did a poll recently, and I thought this would be kind of interesting to our audience. So my background's in consulting, your background's in consulting. So feel free to extrapolate this to other careers as well. But I wanted to understand for people who are in consulting roles, what was holding them back from transitioning out of consulting? Because I had been having a lot of conversations, but was just looking for a little bit more data to understand what was going on. And so the top 6 responses that I got after running this poll was, first of all, I don't know what to do next. The second response was, I don't have a plan in place to explore new options. And some caveats to that was, I'm just so busy. There's no time for that. The third top answer was, I'm not sure about what my options are or what roles would even be a fit. So there's just like a lot of unknown here. I've even heard people say, well, I hear a lot of times people in consulting go into private equity, so maybe I should do that. Again, not really understanding what that would mean for you personally, but just searching the market. The next one was, I don't have time to job search. Then I feel really uncomfortable about leaving the job security that I have here. And then the last one, which I think is also interesting given our career paths, is I want to start a business and I'm not quite sure how to go about that. So what I'm seeing here in some of these themes is just there's a lot of unknown, and then coupled when you're in a really demanding corporate career, it's hard to carve out the time to learn about how to do something and then actually do it. And so that's one of the things that I love to do to support people, is that I'll come in and help them build a plan that they just need to follow without thinking about, well, what actually needs to be in the plan. And so taking that guesswork out is what I love to do for people. But just diving into the why. So, I think I wrote about this a little while ago, but, the why, it sort of sounds like this airy-fairy, what's your why? And so I love to actually pin it down and think about, okay, well, what does that tangibly mean for someone's career, for their personal life, or for their business in the areas, Alex, where you're working. And so really the way I like to think about this is it's what are the reasons for why you're doing what you're doing? What is the larger picture, the larger objective that's fueling the actions that you're taking, the role you're in, why you're working so hard in your business. And it's got to be bigger than, I just want to earn this amount of money. It's got to be bigger than, I need this type of career because that validates part of me and my identity. It has to be so much bigger than that. So as I dig into it with people, and there's a little exercise that I'd love to just quickly share with you. So if you're listening, feel free to jot this down and do it on your own time. So I like to recommend, if you're a verbal processor, maybe talk about it with somebody. If journaling is your way to go, just find a way to get it out of you so you're not just thinking about it. But I encourage, yeah, right? Like we can think about this. Yeah. But just sit down and think about, okay, so in 10 years, how old are you going to be? Who's going to be with you in 10 years? And I'm not necessarily talking about people at work, but I'm talking about like who's around you. So thinking about that, who are you influencing in 10 years? And then lastly, what experiences that will you have had over 10 years that you want to talk about? So it's just those 4 questions. And I use that exercise. It's very simple, but I use it a lot with my clients. And it's amazing what happens, because I think all of us have these dreams locked in our hearts about what we imagine the future to be like, about what we imagine our life to be like. And then life happens and we get really busy, or we're in a high stress corporate career that doesn't allow for a lot of time for these elements to come in. And we're trying to get our work-life balance in place. And so these dreams or these whispers start to fade away into the background. And so by giving yourself a little bit of space and actually digging into it, that can really help jumpstart what is your why. And then in my work, we do a lot of backwards then thinking about, okay, well, if that's where you want to go, let's talk about, there's probably 10 different paths you could take to get there. So let's look at them. Let's evaluate them. Let's consider what you would find most enjoyable, what you would find most fulfilling as a stepping to get there. So that's a little bit how I like to think about my why. But Alex, I'm so curious, when you work with founders, tell me a little bit more about what that means as you're delving into the why for a business.
I love what you said. It's so similar, actually, because the reality is, as a founder, it's your business. And you are going to put in more work than anybody else to get it wherever it's going. And so many of us, I loved about what you said, and I'm just gonna like reframe it because I think I want everyone to hear this. So many of us get lost in the mix.
Yeah.
We get defined by our jobs, or we build momentum based on external reward and recognition, right? And I'm not here to like slate the school system, but like it's literally how we come up, right? It's like you show up here every day, you do work, and then we give you a grade, and that determines like what happens next. So like, of
Yeah.
course, right? Like, of course we are going to be that. And what we also get caught up by what we believe we should do, and that might be because of our family or culture or values. That might be about what we think makes us a good person, which again,
Yeah.
more and more discourse is happening about how people need to take care of themselves, right? All of these things that can take us away from what fulfills us or what makes us the best version of us and all of that. And I think there's a real opportunity to self-reflect and define what success means for you, and whether that's you as a person going through different career journey and roles, but also obviously should be beyond just your job, or you as somebody who is creating a company and creating possibly, a movement for change, depending on what your company is, right? So what I talk about with my clients is very similar, and I frame it with them as, what's the why? So what's the purpose of your company? What is it out there to do? What are the values that you want your company to embody, so that this is when you show up, when your employees show up, when your clients show up, anyone who interacts with your company should feel this and should, to a degree, align with it in order to like be part of that ecosystem. But also, I want them to think about like what their role is going to be and what lifestyle they want when we talk about the longer term. So, what is the company achieving? But what are you doing, right? And that might be, great, I want to build this to a certain size and then I want to sell it. And I want to build this to like this size and be in this many markets, and we're not talking like 8 versus 9, but like 1 versus 10, like what are we talking about? Or actually just want to get to this point and then I want to be able to have a life. And do you want to be, with your family all the time? Do you want to be hands-on with clients? Do you want to be running it but from a strategic place? Do you actually want to step away and have it run and be speaking all over the world? Because all of those have different implications as to how we build that business. And what I really encourage my clients to sit with is there is no wrong answer. Everyone has different needs and wants and circumstances. So if you want to change the world, that's awesome. If you want to make a lot of money, there's always a need under there that's beyond that. And that's also fine.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? Like, there is no wrong answer, but what is important is to get honest, because if you don't actually identify what you want, the odds of you getting there are very minimal. But either way, you're going to do a ton of work in building a business. And honestly, whether the business succeeds or not, you're going to do a ton of work. So you can do a ton of work and have a not successful business. You can do a ton of work and have a successful business, but it doesn't meet your needs. Or you can do a ton of work and have a successful business that meets your needs. Which door would you like to choose? So that's, I think there's a real similarity and overlap in what we do. I think the circumstance is just like a little bit different in how, honestly, maybe just like how many people it directly impacts. But really, I think it's the same.
Well, and you brought up something really interesting, Alex, around the financial side. And so, I mean, even in that poll that I did, that was one of the top answers that came up around, I feel really uncomfortable, or I feel even scared about leaving the job security. And so, if you've built a successful corporate career and you're thinking, okay, I'm getting this like internal nudge that there's something new and I need a change. And so, there's a variety of options to you at that point, right? Like you can transition companies, same industry. You could move into something new from another corporate perspective. Or you could take this other path. And I hear so many professionals, they're enamored by the startup space, and that's not a bad thing. I use enamored because there's so much incredible things coming
Mm.
from the startup space, and so it's natural that we're attracted to what's happening there and want to be part of it. But there's so many different avenues for that. One of the things that I think holds people back is, when you've been working your way up at a corporation, or you've been working your way up in a career path. There's a lot of security there. There's a lot of, you've got companies investing in your retirement. You've got your salary is guaranteed to go up. You know that you're going to be like, there's a lot of security there. But then, for both of us, we've stepped into entrepreneurial roles. And I got to tell you a funny story. So when I was evaluating whether or not to dive into Prosper back in the day, this is hilarious, but the business was like so new. Like there was
Mhm.
not much there at that point. But I built a financial model for myself, and I
Of
projected
course you did.
how, of course I did, right? I
Oh.
projected different scenarios of if I, went back into consulting, or we exited with all these different scenarios. And finally, my husband said to me, he's like, you know what? You kind of have to put this aside and just decide, are you going to do this, or are you not going to do this? And then
Mhm.
regardless of the outcome, we're going to be okay. And we're going to deal with it. And so
Mhm.
that was just a really powerful moment for me. And I realized that my heart had this, like, there was an identity piece for me around, okay, I have this title, I am earning this money. And I didn't think that that was important to me, but it was so important to me. And
It's
so
foundational to our
yeah,
evolution. It's how we're built.
and this process then of, for a period of time in the business as we were getting going, I didn't take a salary. And that was a really interesting process for me to go through mentally. So grateful for it, because it actually removed a lot of fear from my life. I didn't realize that I was scared of not earning X, or not, and I
Mm.
associated, there was a like, my worth was somewhat tied to that, and I hadn't even thought about that until it was not there. But there was a freedom that came, and it was a fast period of time, and then we moved into like changing that. But it was, what I wanted to share with people around this is that, if you're noticing that there's a resistance, and you feel like, okay, maybe you are considering starting a company, or you're considering transitioning into a career that maybe won't pay the lucrative salaries that, consulting, iBanking, in a legal firm would pay, ask yourself, what could you live off of? And what could you
Mm.
live off of? Like, what are your basic needs? And and then, with a little bit of extra, and then consider to yourself, okay, if I could I do this? And if I can't, why? And
Yeah.
actually get a little bit deeper about understanding what's holding you back. So is there an identity piece that you want to work through, or is there, something else that's going on? But just get a little bit deeper about what that is,
Mm.
because there is so much freedom that comes in your decision making if you're not tied to X dollars. So I just wanted to share that, because that was a huge
I
moment for me.
I actually love that you brought that up because it's reminded me of when I made my leap as well. And just
Hmm.
before I share, I'll try to share quickly because I think it's very similar. But I do want to share something. We also have sometimes a misplaced sense of security in the job in jobs. And
Oh
I'm
my
not,
gosh,
this is not
yes.
to sow fear or anything in anyone listening, right? But I think what we're seeing right now, right, there are massive layoffs. And if you read Anti-Fragile, which is a heavy
Mm,
book, but I do recommend it, they do speak about, this misperception of the security that exists and the how lucrative, staying in a job for your career as opposed to being in potentially more volatile space where in some ways you actually have more control over what you earn. And so
completely.
I'm not going to go into the details of anti-fragile and economic theory, but I would, if you Google it, you can get the synopsis of that chapter. And mine was similar because I think what I want to say is, double down on what you said, Becky, but also we are sometimes blind to the cost of our lifestyle in certain
Yeah.
higher powered or professional roles. And I remember before leaving my role in London, I, I'll be honest, I didn't build like a full financial model, but I kind of took stock and I said, I could actually have the same lifestyle for about 30% less cost if I had more
Mm,
control of my time, because my
wow.
lifestyle was expensive, right? And it
Yeah.
was everything from, how I got around because I was always rushing and late, to
Yeah.
when I booked things like travel or events, or the number of things I would book and not go to,
Hmm.
how I did my groceries and food shopping and eating out, and just all of the things, right? Like, I traded money for time because I
Yeah.
had a good amount of money and not a
Yeah.
lot of time. And,
Yeah.
I absolutely encourage that with my leaders in businesses, right? It's like, delegate to create more space and time in your business. But
Yeah.
that's in a place where that space and time can then continue to earn you more money, right? You're not constrained by, I'm just on a salary and I just need to like keep grinding and working to
Yeah.
move
Yeah.
up. So, what you're talking about like sitting down and really examining it, can be a little like confronting, honestly, but can
Yeah.
also be really freeing. Um, and I think this is a really important topic because actually, as you transition, it's a really great time to learn about yourself, to check in about yourself.
Hmm.
Um, and I know for myself, honestly, my mental well being and mindset, um, around the time I left was when I started to really understand and work on those things. Um,
Wow. Wow.
I had always just been somebody who got things done, who was, a
Yeah.
grinder, who, if you need something done, give it to Alex, would always take on more. And I did not really realize the toll that that took on me over the years. I just
Hmm.
kept on going. And I think when you're coming out of the grind, how to take stock of your mental emotional well-being and
Hmm.
understand like where you are and where you want to be is
Yeah.
such an opportunity to put in place new practices and
Yeah.
really, I think also, we're talking about the why, your North Star, your vision, whatever it might be. It also can feel kind of exciting or heavy or scary, like actually admitting what you want out to like,
Yeah.
the universe, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Um, it can be a lot, right? It's important because if you don't say it, you're not going to get there, but it can be a lot. So, how do you ensure that you're well set up and supported, particularly
Hmm.
if you are transitioning to something with less stability?
Hmm. Yeah. And I'm so glad you shared that, Alex, because I think there's like, as I reflect on, as I've worked in, many, many different organizations, even in organizations that are very conscious about culture, there
Mm,
is this, we're in the workforce, there's this, we need to produce, and there's this constant demand to continue to produce. That's not going to go away. But then if you think about, some of the very stressful corporate environments, and we've
mm,
come from some of those, but there's something that actually happens to your nervous system where you're constantly needing to anticipate the next problem, and in order to deal with that problem you want to kind of be ahead of it, and you're trying to anticipate what's going on with your clients or your customers
mm,
or whatever it looks like, and that takes a toll on you mentally and emotionally. It takes a toll on your body. And so what I found is I've coached people who have transitioned out of some of these more stressful environments and helped them figure
mm,
out what is next. Sometimes it's almost like there's a detox period that needs to happen where someone
mm,
can actually just allow themselves to reset. And if you've been in this environment for years or decades, that's not going to happen over a weekend. It's not going to happen in a week. And so if you're in a position to take, a month, 2 months off in your, and just really settle in terms of, okay, you've can reflect on the amazing things that you've accomplished, but then what is your reset? Are you going to jump back into something that's exactly the same? If you want to, great, all the power to you. But if you're actually looking for something that feels different, that is different, that's going to take a mindset shift, and you're going to have to learn some new skills and actually unlearn
mhm,
some things. Because I know when I transitioned into like really building my own consulting company, and then now with my coaching business, it took so long to stop the grind. I didn't necessarily have to, but I would still work 14-hour days. And I had a young child at home, and it was just like, well, I needed to get stuff done. But it was this, and then I had to go on, again, on another evaluation process of, is this really how I want to live? Is this the legacy that I want to leave? Or, what am I doing in these hours, and can I do them less, or can I do them more effectively? And so there's this, I think, this process to go through. And I get coached, so I love working with a coach around this, because there's so many times when you're in what you're in, you see what you see, and you don't see alternatives, you don't see options. But working with a coach has been so insightful for me, because they bring up blind spots. They help illuminate, hey, have you considered this? Or why do you feel like you have to do this in this way all the time? Is there another way forward? So it's I found it to be a lot of work, but as I've invested in that process, my whole work week has changed. What I focus on has changed. I understand, the times of my day that are highest, I have the best energy. And so I'm going to put that towards my most important tasks. I've learned how to put up boundaries and say no. And this was so foreign and so different to how I operated previously. But there is, if you're wanting to make that shift, there is work that needs to be done. And I think for us to consider, okay, I'm going to step out of this. It's been one environment and I want it to be different, but I'm not willing to, or thinking about the work that needs to go in to make it different, it's just going to be the same.
I love that you said that. We build so many beliefs. We operate off identity. Like we don't know how to operate differently, right? That's how we are built. But you can bring these things to light and put conscious effort into them to make conscious decisions. This actually ties so well to a previous episode with Itamar. So if you're listening to this now and you're like really, thinking this might be the thing, I'm going to encourage you to go find that episode.
Do it.
But I absolutely, I will say probably the last 6 years of my life have been this, because I worked with a coach and I had to work out what I wanted and how I wanted to leave. And I knew I needed support in making that transition. But also I came out and I left in April. And I remember standing in a friend's kitchen in August. I was in London at the time visiting, and I was flying to New York the next day. And I was standing there and we were talking, and, I was kind of going through it. I was having time, and my friend looked at me and she said, "You are the busiest unemployed person I have ever met." And I said, "I prefer fun employed. It's by choice." And she just looked at me and raised an eyebrow, not amused by my attempt to deflect her very, very true comment and observation. She said, "You're busier than most people I know who have a job." And I fundamentally couldn't stop. I had been running at full pace, honestly, my whole life, honestly, my whole life. I had had a job since I was like 12. I had had a job and school and a national level athletics. I, bulldozed my way to get through university. I jumped in, I love consulting, but it absolutely enables and encourages just, the more you'll take on. And I didn't know how to slow down. I just couldn't. And you spoke to nervous system, right? Like, it didn't feel safe to slow down.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that I was looking for a job. So I gave myself a budget when I left consulting. And instead of a timeline, I was just like, the more I can stretch this, the longer until I have to really figure out how to earn again. So I was not under financial pressure at that point. I didn't need to. I still had a runway. I still had all kinds of things I was excited about and interested in. But I also I was so driven on the things that I had set out as what I wanted to achieve in this time off, that even that time off had become this grind that I was just so unable. So I think that is so important. And I honestly probably took another month and a bit for that comment to like really sink in, and a few other things to fall apart for me to say like, and the crazy thing is when I said, fuck it, and started exploring like how to maybe just go off the grid for a bit, how to like do that, that all the opportunities that led to the next thing I ended up doing came in.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And it's almost like when we get to that point where we can stop and slow down, that is truly when the right pieces come because we're ready.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if I was ready for what came next. But no, 100%. 100%. It's, I think you talked about what do you need to unlearn, but I also think
Mhm.
it's really important when you do create that space, and it's not necessarily leaving and slowing down, but it's maybe creating some space to journal or to work with a coach. Um,
Yeah.
Also to, and I do this with my clients a lot because high achievers, we're not great at recognizing what we're actually good at. We're always like, what can I be better at? What can
Yes.
I do next? So
Yeah.
what are you holding? You know, what are the cards you're holding? What
Yeah.
do you have? What wins? What are you amazing at? Because I think that, and I think you have some thoughts on that probably that you could like articulate better. But before you start figuring out what's next, like,
Yeah.
what are you? Where are you?
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you brought this up. Yeah, this has been a topic that I think has just screamed loud and clear at me for years as I've worked with people thinking about transitioning. And the question I get asked is, from these people who are crushing it in their jobs, they're highly rated, they're probably getting recruiters messaging them on LinkedIn a
Mhm.
lot. And they come to me and they say, "But I don't know what skills I actually have." And I just look at them and I'm like, sorry, what? Like, you are so smart. You don't know what skills you have? And I'm sorry, that's not a knock on anybody at all. But
No,
what
but I
I,
used to say for consulting, you know, we write these long job descriptions when we
yeah,
recruit, and then like all you really need to write is like insecure overachiever, apply here, we'll teach you the rest. Like that is the foundational, and I think that extends to a lot of other, you know, quote unquote high
yeah,
powered, you know, careers. Is we're these people who are like so intelligent and so
hmm,
I can never think of the word in English, polyvalent, like multi-skilled,
yes,
and so adaptable, and you
yeah,
learn so
yeah,
quickly that we almost like can
you
do
forget.
anything. You can kind of figure out anything, and it makes it hard sometimes to come back and be like, what am I actually amazing? What have I
Yeah.
done? And how do I apply that to figuring out what's next?
Exactly. And I think I hear a lot about this from people who are in professional services
Mm.
and then wanting to transition to industry, for
Mhm.
in whatever capacity, because industry is like, okay, well, have you come up through the marketing career path or do you know all the finance, elements and the ecosystem in order to be able to work in something like private equity or something like that. And so it's hard then to make that move because you're not doing like for like. You're actually needing to do a bit more work to showcase that you have the skills that they're looking for, and I think that's where people get really stuck. But what I love to do is actually help professionals dig deep in terms of what have they done and what are their objective skill sets. And so I like to look at this in terms of hard skills and soft skills, and then within soft skills you've got leadership skills as well. um, Hard skills are they're a little bit easier. They're like, can you code? Can you build an Excel model? What are sort of the objective things?
Mm.
Can you, I think, negotiate? There's some art and science to it, but there are some hard skills around negotiation. And then you've got these soft skills. And I think this is where a lot of professional services get stuck because they're
Mhm.
steeped in them. And honestly, the further you get in your career, it's the soft skills you need to be indexing on. And the hard skills, that's why
Yeah.
you have a team. The team is the one who's really skilled there. But it's things like persuasion, it's things like influence, it's things like knowing how to tell a story so that people will
Mhm.
follow and be engaged in. So there's so many elements to this, and so what I like to do is I like to work with my clients to break down. Okay, what have they accomplished? Let's just even look at the last 12 months. What have they accomplished? And then what did they do, i.e., what skills did they use to actually make that happen? And so sometimes, if you look at a project or a case, or a specific client situation, there's probably 30 different things that you did and maybe 60 different skills you used. And so it's about thinking back to, okay, what were those skills? How did you use them? Are they sort of in the nascent stage? Are they really developed? Are they like C-suite material? And then being able to talk about them in a way that actually makes sense and is compelling, both in a written format as well as verbally. So one of the things I knew we were going to be talking about this, and I really wanted to just share something with our audience today. So if you are on, I've actually created a bit of a template for you that will help you evaluate either your current role or your past project. And it's a way, there's questions and there's things to fill out that will help you discover what your skills are. And not just from again, like an airy fairy perspective, but it's like, what are your tangible skills that you, and I love thinking about what are your tangible skills, because that's money in the bank for you. That's your future earnings right there. And so being able to understand them, to quantify them, to speak about them, and know and have confidence as you do that, that's what's going to allow you to navigate any job search or any career transition, whether it be you're landing in an entrepreneurial space, whether you're going into another large corporation or a scale up. It's those skill sets and the confidence that you're going to gain through knowing that will allow you to step into that role and just crush it from day one.
I love it. We're upgrading this, guys, upgrading the podcast. There's giveaways now. The Oprah of business and career. Good template. Well, at the end, we'll make sure people know how they can find that and access that, because
amazing.
It's wild, but just having something to look at or something to follow, it honestly can be such a game changer, right? Like we do tend to get a little bit stuck of not knowing where to start. And I think anyone who's done literally anything from a like home improvement project to career change, like will recognize that moment of just like not knowing where to start. So thank you, Beckie. That's amazing.
Oh, my pleasure.
I think so. So thinking about, what is next, how to decide what to do next. Like that's, I think a lot of people came here for that and like they've gotten a lot of value so far, but I am such a big advocate of making things tangible, which is what you were just talking about. Otherwise we get stuck sometimes in this like hypothetical dream, like it's too big and it's too, nebulous. So if you have your why, which can be really big, how do you start to like make it tangible? And you talked about determining your skills, right? Determining your skills. I think that's amazing. Really starting to also like put yourself into a future state of like, okay, I have these skills, like what could I be doing with them? And I think it really can help clear away that noise. So once you start to have some sense of that, and another way just that you could do that, if you are, especially if you're coming from consulting, would be like, okay, if I was going to go into this area, like how would I consult to that role, right? Put yourself in your current role where you probably have been put on all kinds of things you didn't feel like you were qualified to do. Spoiler alert for anyone who's not in consulting. That's like a constant feeling. And you crushed it, right? Because actually you had a ton of tools and resources. So like that is definitely something I would consider. But okay, so you start to have some sense of direction. Like how do you actually figure out what's out there and what's available?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. So my favorite way to take a systemized approach to this is you got to start with your why. You got to know where you want to be. Then you got to peel that back and think to yourself, okay, what are the 5 to 10 different ways that I could get there that would give me an incremental new set of skills or build on the set of skills that I'm having today. So for example, let's just say I want to, my goal is to, I should have had an example pre-prepared, but let's just say my goal in 10 years is I want to run an organization that, supports women moving into the workforce. And so I'm going to be running the organization. I'm going to need to be networking with a large number of not-for-profits, potentially schools, potentially other partner organizations. So you can already start to see some of the skill sets coming in there. And let's just say for ease of, you're in consulting right now, or you're in professional services. So then it's thinking about, okay, if that's where I want to be, maybe you can start doing that before 10 years, but getting a larger understanding of what options are available to you now will help. So one of the things that you could be delving into is sales, or B2B selling. Another could be fundraising as another potential area to consider. Another could be uh, you know, kind of any sort of major management or leadership role where you're building out and scaling potentially a global team. So you come with those leadership skills. So you're already starting to see that, this isn't saying, okay, I want to be a sales manager or a sales VP at Google. That comes a little bit later, but you're starting to say, okay, these are sort of the avenues that I could explore. So you create your first brainstormed list of, okay, these are the things I could explore. And then you think, okay, well, I'm really not interested in fundraising, so I'm going to get rid of that. But I am very curious about building out an organization from a sales perspective and then potentially scaling a sales team. So I'm going to learn a little bit more about that. Now, the next thing to do is you need to validate what you're going to do. So you got to go to the market. And the next step is to develop a networking plan where you can start to connect with people who are in those roles at varying levels of an organization. So you could connect with someone who's at a startup, someone as a scale up, someone who's at a larger corporation or a publicly traded company, and then talk to them a little bit more about what they did to get there, what skill sets they need, what they would be looking for if they were to replace themselves, and really get a better understanding of what you would need to portray in an application or in a verbal pitch about how you would be the best candidate for that. And so I always like to say, I've been in sales roles before, and so I like to kind of connect networking with sales. And so in sales, you have a prospect list, and so you've got however many people you're planning on connecting with. You're not going to connect, let alone convert 100% of those people. So that's why I say when you're creating your networking plan, make a list of 100 people that you could talk to. That's a lot of people. You're not going to talk to 100 people. But if you contact 100 people, you might speak to, so the stats are, if you get an introduction to somebody, your likelihood to speak to them is 70%. If you cold outreach, the likelihood to connect with them is about 20 to 30%, depending on how well crafted your message is and sort of who you are. So take into account those probabilities. And if your goal at the end is to speak to 30 people, then you run your probabilities and run your networking that way. But that is what is going to give you insight into, is this even something I want to do, first of all? Secondly, how do I need to sell myself or present myself? What skill sets do I need to be able to be competitive? And then thirdly, what companies am I actually aligned to that would make me excited to wake up on Monday morning and push their vision forward from this perspective? So that's how I like to think about it from a career perspective. There's also a lot we could talk about from the entrepreneurial side as well, but I'll leave it up to you, Alex, where you want to take it.
I want to just pause there because I want everyone to soak that in, because there's two things that really stood out for me. One is you need to figure out what's out there. So once you have your initial idea, actually go out and understand it. And that might sound really weird, but I look back and the majority of jobs or roles I have had, I didn't know they even existed 2 years before I was doing those jobs. The world is vast. It's rapidly changing. You may have a sense of what's out there, but what the job actually is, what they do day to day, the skills required are not always obvious. And maybe there might be people who are absolutely like going, from A to B as opposed to, A to Z. But I think that getting out and networking and talking to people, and by talking to people that are doing things you think you want to do, they might tell you about something else. And so really leaning in on your curiosity is a driver for us. So if you're looking and you're thinking, I don't have time and energy, you're not curious enough, right? Like we think about passion. But again, I'm going to throw another book reference in here with like Peak Performance. The Art of Impossible by Stephen Kohler. It talks about the formula to do like impossible things, and curiosity is such a driver for us as humans. So get curious and really figure out what is out there, because it may be things that literally weren't being done when you started in whatever you're doing now, or when you were in school, or when you had that really horrible career day where there was like accountants, doctors, and lawyers, and like that was it. And then the other thing was what you mentioned about like which companies do you align with. So there is like a job and a role and a skill set, And then there is the company's mission, vision, purpose, culture. And that can be wildly different between
Mm-hmm.
companies that on the outside appear to be exactly the same.
Yeah.
So having coffee chats or information interviews or whatever you want to call them with people and really asking about what is important to you, what their experience has been like, things, and that could be things like the day-to-day schedule flexibility, that could be things like mentorship, that could be things like
Mm-hmm.
career advancement, that could be things like um, if you are looking at planning a family, what have people's experience been like with coming back from parental leave, right? Like
Yeah.
it could be anything. What are the opportunities for international transfers if that's something you're interested in, right? Like
Yeah.
you want to do everything you can because change is hard and change is a big effort. You want to do everything you can to understand what's going to be important to you. And I know that there's a lot of different points in life where these changes might be, you might feel pushed into them, but you also might feel concerned. And somebody actually asked a question around, transitioning into a part-time quality part-time role after retirement. A lot of peers are nearing
Mm.
retirement, are looking forward to it, but they still want to work and use their skills on a part-time basis with flexible
Yeah.
hours. And Beckie, I would love your thoughts on that. And I don't know if we can also maybe merge that with people starting families, because I think there's some parallels around like I want to be engaged and excel and my life circumstances are changing. So if those
Yeah.
can't be paired together, tell
Yeah,
quickly.
I think they can. So one of the things that I would just say, and I'll talk to both scenarios and then address each one. But one of the things that I always tell somebody, especially when they're in a big change of life. So becoming a parent, your whole world, your whole life changes forever. Same thing with retirement. The way you've done life is now completely different. And your life doesn't end at retirement. It actually it's a new chapter, and there's new freedom that comes, and there's this wealth of experience that you can continue to share and support others with. So both are really, really unique opportunities and transition points. One of the things that I always say to people who are going through a transition is think about, okay, what do you want your life to look like? What do you want your life to feel like? And this means, within your day. So as a mom or as a dad, and you've got young kids at home, okay, how do you want to be working full time, 40 to 60 hours a week? Or do you want to still have a day or two or three with your kids? And then really dig into what would that mean for you personally? What would that mean for you mentally? What would that mean for your family financially? And really think about, okay, well, what type of an environment would be able to support you well through that? And so I think getting very clear on what your values are during this season, and I'm going to use that word season and actually pause there, because your kids are young once. You're never going to get that back again. So do that season well, so that when they're 20, you can look back and be proud of the decisions that you've made. Now, everybody's in a different scenario. Sometimes there isn't flexibility from a financial perspective to be able to work part-time or take additional time to stay at home. And that's okay. But think about, what are you valuing during this season, and how do you want to show up for your kids? And then work that first into your week and into your day. And then it may mean you might be in an organization that just is not conducive to supporting what you value in this season. And that would be your clue to say, okay, I need to do a job search, and I need to find something that actually aligns with my values for this season. And there's a host of things that you can do. I like to help my clients get really creative, because sometimes people haven't really thought about the options that are available to them, because we've been so taught that we work 5 days a week and we work 40 to 60 hours and this is the way it is. But sure, yeah, that is the way majority of people work,
Yeah.
but it isn't the only way to work. And there's a lot of things to think about. Similarly, if you're in retirement, what do you want your day to look like? What do you want your week to look like? What's going to light you up? and then think about what are the activities or what are the work experiences that you want to build into your schedule and build into your week, to be able to hit those goals. So it's about being very intentional about what you value and what you want,
Mm.
and then just going after it. I'm going to throw in my own book reference, Alex, and this was something that really helped unlock so many doors mentally in my mindset, after I had my first child, that allowed me to say, at that particular point in time, I only wanted to be working 3 days a week. I wanted to have 2 full days dedicated to my child when I went back to work. And I mean, that's a whole other story in and of itself, because I still worked like 15-hour days on the days when I did work, but I kept these boundaries up around these 2 days. And so I would turn my phone off, I would turn my notifications off, and I had systems set up in place to capture whatever would come in, when I was off. But it was about being very clear with myself first, because I knew that I was the keeper of those boundaries, and that was really hard. But this book really helped me, develop that and then stick to it in those moments when those boundaries got bumped up against. And it's called Success Principles, and it's by Jack Canfield. So it's a bit of an older
Mm.
book, but I actually read it every year now, because the elements in it, or the ideas in it, have just so influenced my professional career, my personal life, as well as my business. So just want to throw that out there as well.
I love that. I'm going to make sure we link all of those in the show
Yeah,
notes.
I think we need to.
All the books. So I hope that that answered the question. I think, what you said is fantastic. And I think what it really, again, comes down to is networking once you know those principles of what
Yeah,
you're looking for, the season of life that you're in, and just going out there. And the thing is, companies are not necessarily great at advertising their level of flexibility.
no,
So similar to the statistics that women will only apply if they are 100 to 120% of the requirements, and men tend to be a little bit more like, let's give it a go. I would say if you're in a season of life that's changing and you kind of know what you're looking for, look for roles and just reach out and
yeah,
find a way to insulate yourself by knowing that, hey, this might not work for the company, but I bring something really
yes,
powerful, and
yes,
I also bring it in this package with these boundaries, and that you never know what might work, right? So
yeah,
I would say don't be looking for things that are advertised as, I guess time wise, exactly what you're looking for, but go and present yourself and say, I would love to do this and I could kill it. And these are my constraints and I can deliver in those constraints, or this is how I
yeah.
could deliver in those constraints. And that takes a little bit of, gumption, let's say. Try to keep this somewhat PG. Um, but yeah,
Yes, it
like,
absolutely does.
right? You
But
got
for
to
anyone
prepare
listening,
yourself.
you can do it. Like there's internal work that you're gonna have to do first. But I promise you, if you can commit to that, oh my gosh, the results on the other side are just, they bleed over into everything else. Create
Yeah.
the create the career you want to have, not the career that the company or the world, the job market is advertising to you. It's so
Yeah.
possible.
Think about something where someone has told you about something and you're just like, oh my God, I want that. And then they tell you how you
Yeah.
get it. And you're like, oh, I can't afford that, or whatever. But then you figure it out. You figure out a way because you're so sold. That's what you need
Yeah.
to do, right? Is you need to go to a company and be like, I am the one. And by the
Hmm.
way, this is what that's going to mean for you. I believe in you to make
Yeah.
it happen, right? Like put it
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
them to believe and figure out and figure out how they can access what you offer, right?
Hmm.
So you mentioned something before about entrepreneurship, and I want to bring this. I absolutely want to talk about this because I don't think we can have this conversation and not talk about it since we both
Yeah.
went back. That would be like a really weird conversation. But before we talk about entrepreneurship, I want to just say, and maybe this is controversial, I don't think it's for everyone, especially solo. I think it's
Yeah.
over glamorized. And I think the long term commitment to grow anything substantial that you are actually seeing out in the world is is massive. right?
Yeah.
And I have recently had an opportunity come up and been offered to me, and I literally said to the people, it's like going into a marriage, right? If you are going to build something, it is a long-term commitment. It is
Yeah.
years before you know whether it's going to work really, like
Yeah.
properly. Um, and it is a very, very hard road. And what I think on the flip side is that intrapreneurship is very underrated.
Yes.
um, and for those who don't know what entrepreneurship means, it means basically, you have a job within an organization where you are, relatively kind of, I'm going to say normal job. It's a salary, it's stable.
Yeah.
You show up within whatever the agreed hours and deliverables are. But there, you take initiative and you bring ideas to the table and you get to champion and lead those while doing your day job with the support of your organization. Hopefully that's a clear description for everyone. And I think the reason I say this is there are so many incredible ways to develop and flex your trailblazer and creative skills within an organization and within a team. And I think it's super important for companies' success to have people doing that, but it also comes with support and safety, and you don't have to be in that energy 24/7. You get to build and test your entrepreneurial skills, your entrepreneurial appetite, and
Yeah.
that is absolutely, looking back, how I was in my corporate career. I
Mm-hmm.
may not have fully recognized it, but the feedback I got helped me understand it. And then I kind of slowly grew that until the point where I am now, where I actually have my own business. But I never wanted my own business, and I was very against it. I had some big beliefs and some big things that I was afraid of. And it,
Mm-hmm.
it took me a long time to also know what I wanted to do that was strong enough to kind of overcome that. And also the experiences I
Yeah.
had that helped me realize that I would actually be able to handle the things that I was kind of afraid of.
Mm-hmm. So well said. That was really well said.
I have strong opinions on the topic.
I for the sake of time, I'm not going to reiterate, but yeah, there's a lot. I think we need to do another session on
I
this
think we
because,
do.
like, how to evaluate your. Anyway, there's a lot to talk about here,
Mm.
in terms of if you're thinking about embarking on the entrepreneurship path. There's a lot to consider. So maybe we do need to do a separate talk. But one thing I just wanted to say, just with the time that we do have, is don't be. I think a lot of times people look at entrepreneurship and it's like an all or nothing. And sure, depending on your idea, it might be an all or nothing. But in the early stages, there's so many flexible ways to think about testing an idea. And I want to say
Mm.
test because I think a lot of times, people will be like, oh, I have this idea, and they'll start building out a business plan and all this. And business plans are great, and I'm not going to knock on them, but they sometimes just are so unrealistic because
Mm.
when you're building a business, it's iterative. And when you're testing an idea, it's like, think of the scientific method. You have a hypothesis, you're like, okay, well, I think the market's going to respond to this offering in this way. So then you run a bunch of tests and you collect data and you say, oh, actually, no, it fell flat. Okay, well, you can either then abandon the idea or you tweak the idea and you say, okay, well, I've learned from the feedback from people that this part didn't work, but this part was great. So then you reiterate that and then you try it again. And so this is the beginning of a startup. It's just this constant trying something, putting it out there, probably getting rejected, getting feedback, refining, and doing that and the faster you can do that, the faster your product or your service is going to get better. And so as you're doing that, you don't have to do that full time. Obviously check your employment contract if you can't work on anything on the side. But there's so many ways that you can fast iterate on things from a low budget perspective, obviously depending on your idea. But then doing that while still being employed, whether it's part-time or, even full-time and you're working on the weekends. And so my challenge is don't jump too fast, but be very clear about what you're doing, why you're doing it, what your hypothesis about the results are going to be, and then time box it. So I'll give you a personal example. So when I branched out and started building this coaching business, I gave myself a period of time and I said, all right, I'm going to do these activities over this period of time. And if I'm going to hit this amount in revenue, this amount in this metric, and this amount in this metric, I'll know that there's signal that this is working.
Mm,
And those metrics weren't the what I want to make or what, they were smaller. But I wanted signal to know, okay, is this appropriate? Like, is this the right direction, or are people just like, meh? And so I did that. I positively hit those metrics. And so I said, okay, great. I know there's interest. Now, what have I learned during these 3 months about how I can
mm,
refine my messaging, about how I can refine how I serve people? Then I created another time box and I said, okay, well, by this point, I need to see this for revenue, this and this metric, and this and this metric. And so then I continued through that process. If I hit 2 of the 3 metrics, that was my cue to say, okay, well, let's keep going. But if I was only going to be hitting 1 of those metrics, then that was my cue to say, okay, well, maybe it's actually time to evaluate. Do I need to go and do something else and keep this on the side? So there's so many ways that you can think about this. And the what I love about this approach is that even if you were to say take, I don't know, 6 months out of your job, go on an unpaid sabbatical, and you were to run a series of tests about your idea, you could, and say it failed, say you got to the end and it didn't work out. What you would do is you'd come back with this story of very
mm,
clearly what you did, what you tested, what happened, what you heard, and why you're coming back. And you're
mm,
going to be so much stronger as a professional and bring that entrepreneurial skill set, which I would say like probably 80% of the companies have now on their job postings, because it is such an important skill set and a mindset to bring to any corporation. Um,
mm.
and it's all good. Like, it doesn't matter if it failed. It doesn't matter if it succeeded. And so you can make it a little bit more objective, and it becomes less about you failed or your idea didn't work. And it becomes just more objective about what happened, and you happen to be the one running it.
I love that. I think that that is such a great way of outlining it. The experimental method is so applicable here. And, the statistics are out there. It's fail 9 times,
Yeah.
succeed once, right? Anyone who has, something significant that, if you don't know them personally, but you know their business, they have a graveyard of,
Yes.
trial and error. Absolutely. And a million stories, and the time where they weren't going to make it, and probably the time where somebody came and kind of like pulled them up by their bootstraps, or they had to,
Yeah.
make a major lifestyle change, right? So it's that combination of like having to know that you're going to be okay, having to figure out what your safety net is, whether that exists or you create it. But I think also, the time bound nature and the metrics, we can discount success as well as we can ignore the signals that something isn't working, and like both of those are really detrimental
Yeah.
to effective sustained success in the figuring it out in the long term. So I love that. I want to just talk quickly about coaching. We both do some form of coaching, advisory, consulting. We come from that, and we've also both worked with coaches, and I think we could say that we are unbiased in how important it is in the transition because of our personal experience. Anyone listening is going to think we're biased because we both do that now as our livelihood. But I want to know, what has been the process like for you when you have worked with coaches? How has it
Mhm.
actually benefited you as opposed to looking at your clients and the benefits that you bring to them?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so for me personally, I started coaching at a really pivotal time. This was when I was co-founder at Prosper, and we had a global team of coaches that I was leading, and I thought I should probably have a coach before I sound really
Oh,
hypocritical. So
yeah.
I started working with an incredible coach, and what stood out to me was that we did all of this work around clarifying my North Star, my why. Why was I doing
Mhm.
what I was doing? And I started this coaching relationship at a point where I was feeling a little bit burned out in the business. There was just this high pace that we were maintaining to keep up with the growth of the business. And I started to feel these rumblings in my heart around other things I wanted to do as well. And I kept feeling that now was the time, but I didn't know how I was going to make that happen. And so by working with this coach, she really helped me clarify, okay, what was it that I was sensing? And then how could I start to integrate that into my professional life. And so at that point, it was things like speaking, writing, um, and so I was able to integrate that. But I think really where the big moment for me was that at that point I was starting to think about wanting to start a family, and I just had no clue with the way my life was set up. Like literally, it was just impossible the way my life was set up, unless there were going to be huge changes. But I wasn't in a position, nor did I want to make these huge changes, because I was enjoying what I was doing, and I was feeling this pressure and this tug. And so that was a big topic that we worked through, and through her expert coaching was able to identify the fears that I had, um, and drill down into what was holding me back and my perceptions of myself and how I was going to navigate all of this. And it was huge. It was like, it was very groundbreaking for me. And I did not go into that relationship expecting to talk about something so deeply personal. Yet this deeply personal topic was impacting my work, because I'm the same person at home as I am leading an organization. And so, yeah, that was a huge moment for me.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think one of the things that stands out for me when I talk about this is two things. One is it's never a bad time to have a coach. I don't think there's ever a bad time. And I think we all have different circles, and some of us have more people we can talk to who have, a level of perspective, emotional maturity, can hold space, be objective than others. But there is a power to bringing somebody in for that role. It's a little bit like therapy, right? Like they are outside of your life. It is a safe space where you can talk about anything, and they don't have any preconceived notions that they're bringing in, or they care about you, but they're not worried about, maintaining a status quo or a relationship in the way that people in your life will. So I think that's really, really powerful. And I will say all my coaches, have been tough, like super loving, but tough in different ways. But the other thing I want to say, the other thing that made me think of is people often feel like, oh, I need to know exactly why I want to be coached, or what I'm trying to do in order to choose the right coach. And I think, you should choose your coaches wisely and do your research. But I actually went and looked up, it's hard to find, but I looked up what I wrote on the intro to my first coach's, are we going to work together call. And I said, looking for someone who can provide insight/guidance, structure, and challenge to help me weigh the career change options ahead and prepare to take action. There's nothing in there that says where I want to go, what kind of person I am, like the thing I'm trying to achieve, other than I'm considering a career change. And I will say, similar to you, the things that we talked about, I actually did not, with that coach, necessarily arrive at, I want to do this in this way and then go and get a job. What I got to was, I need some time, like you referred to. I need some time to recalibrate and to heal. And I learned so much about myself. And the initial time that one of the biggest things I actually got out of it was I reflected on when was the last time I felt most alive, and that the world was full of potential, and that it was like, the world was my oyster. And I was like, I want to feel that way again. And what was it about that time that helped me do that? And so that ended up helping me come up with 3 objectives for my time off, right? So in my time with a coach, I said, I'm actually going to leave without a plan, and I'm going to take some time off, and I need to save up a bit of money to do that. Like that was what came out of my coaching. So it's not always what you expect, but it's like you don't always get what you want, but you get what you need. And actually what I came out with was these 3 things. And to this day, those are actually 3 drivers for me. And it was to feel healthy, and that is mentally and physically, to feel inspired. So to be having conversations and doing things that feel inspired and meaningful, and to feel connected. Because when I was a consultant, I was on the go constantly. I was famous for 36-hour visits to people on other continents. Even when I was there, I was still plugged in. I wasn't super present. So being connected was a big one. And since then, I've had various coaches at various meetings, and they have all helped me to understand myself, to grow, to see my strengths more clearly, and also strip away layers of beliefs and be able to dig into what's underneath them. because our beliefs are so powerful and we often are not very aware of them, and they do impact us daily, and they do impact us and hold us back from things and create quite a lot of conflict. So
Yeah.
I think that's, yeah, I think that it's a little bit like ending on a bit of a sensitive share, but
Yeah.
I'm conscious of time. We're definitely going to do this again. We've had so many questions and people asking for more. So we'll definitely do that. But before we kind of jump, Beckie, you introduced yourself, but I just want to quickly give you a chance to, if people are curious about you, where can they go learn more about you? What specifically, should they be reaching out to you? How should they be specifically reaching out to you? What do you help with?
Oh my goodness. Thank you, Alex. Well, first of all, thank you so much for everyone who tuned in to this conversation. I'm so glad you're here. If you want to continue to stay connected to the work that I do, there's three things you can do. So the first is just add me on LinkedIn. I post 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, with really actionable strategies and insights around how to think about your mindset, your career, any upcoming transitions. So that's the first place I recommend going. The second is that I have a weekly email newsletter that goes out every Saturday at 8:30 Eastern. This is packed, so a couple layers deeper than what I post on LinkedIn, but it's packed with stories, it's packed with tangible insights, tips. I share a lot of resources there. I constantly get people saying, wow, you're giving away so much stuff. And I want to serve through this medium. So that's a great place to continue to stay connected. And then the last, if you've really been sparked by this conversation and you recognize, hey, I'm actually in a place where I think I'd like coaching. I offer a free intro to coaching conversation where we can talk about what's going on in your life and see if there's a fit, and if it feels like what I offer will make sense for you and actually help propel you forward, then we can have a conversation about what it can look like to work together. So all of those options, recommend the first two, at least just to stay connected. And then if you feel like you're at a point where you want to connect, I would love that. I love hearing people's stories, and just would love to be able to support you.
Guys, I cannot recommend Beckie enough. And I will say I have seen results with people I know who I've referred over to her, and they speak for themselves. So if you are considering making a shift, absolutely take advantage of those options. What we'll do is we'll actually put out a link where you can sign up, I think, as well, and get is it the Discover Your Career Skills template that you were
Yes.
mentioning?
Yeah.
So if you want to join, we'll do it in a way where you can actually join both of our email lists. So you can hear about upcoming events like this. You'll get the Discover Your Career Skills template. And then also when you join my email list, which is going to be a joint sign up, you can receive 5 tips for strategic planning that generates tangible results. So something that'll help you with the planning process. And then there's a couple bonus things that will come along with that. Because Beckie, you were going to give things away. You inspired me. I had to also. I was like, we are going to be the Oprah of business, and we're just going to be giving value, and everybody gets something. So, if you're looking to make a career change, if you're looking at what the next evolution of your role or of your company, if you are a
Yeah.
founder looking at the next stage of growth, both of us are really amazing at that. So we would love to have you in our world, in our network. And Beckie, thank you. We've known each other the longest, and we have had the longest conversation thus far. We're just winning
Only
on all
fitting.
metrics. We will absolutely be doing this again. I cannot thank you enough for coming and sharing.
Oh, my pleasure, Alex. This was so much fun. And yeah, just a plug for Alex. She is someone you want in your network and in your corner. I can't promote her enough. But if you are a founder, if you're thinking about starting a business, if you're in any way, shape, or form involved in your own thing, even if you're part of the leadership team, connect with Alex, because you will not regret that conversation. And I can tell you that from personal experience. She's phenomenal, and so sharp. So she'll bring a lot of new perspectives and things to think about, as well as ways to help transform what you're doing.
Thank
This
you
was
so
so
much,
fun.
Becky. I'm just blushing over here. Amazing. Thank you to everyone who joined. Thank you for the questions. If for some reason we didn't get your question, we'll have a look in the chat and try to answer you there. And if not, we'll
Yes.
backlog it for the next chat because this was absolutely going to happen again.
I love
Have an
it.
amazing day.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thanks for tuning in. Our goal is to create connections and inspire conversations. So please subscribe, rate, review, and share this podcast with your network if you enjoyed today's episode. Sharing is caring. If you're ready to take your business to the next level and are curious how I can help, click the link in the episode notes to schedule a call. Got questions or topics you want us to discuss? Click the link in the episode notes to share them with us. Your question might even get featured in an upcoming episode. And remember, this podcast is not intended to replace legal, tax, or other kinds of professional advice. Thanks for joining us on this adventure. We'll catch you on the flip side.